Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Pritha, and my co presenter for today is Shilpa. Both of us are developers in the Ceph RGW team at Red Hat, and together we will be presenting a talk on scalable open source object storage. So, the agenda for the talk is going to be like this. So, we'll start off by discussing the various types of storage, and then we'll move on to describing a little bit about what Ceph is and some of the components of Ceph. And then we'll go on to talking about Ceph Object Gateway and the different object storage features that the Ceph Object Gateway provides. So, talking about the various kinds of storage that we have at hand uh, these days. On one hand are the traditional types known as the block and file storage. And on the other hand, we have a relatively newer one, which is known as the object storage. In block storage, data is stored in blocks. The blocks do not have any metadata associated with them, and all the heavy lifting is done by the application with respect to metadata and multi-user access, etc. And block storage is primarily used in applications that need fast access time. File system storage stores its data in files, which are organized in a hierarchical fashion in folders. And a limited amount of metadata can be associated with files. But as the files and folders grow in size, retrieving a file can become too cumbersome. And file systems are primarily used to store structured data. In object storage, data is stored in a flat namespace in buckets and objects. An object is a basic unit of data storage, and it also has very rich metadata associated with it. An object is identified by a unique ID, which is unique across the entire storage cluster. Objects are immutable, which means that they cannot be updated, and hence object storage makes sense in applications which rarely update the data that gets stored in them. And examples of such applications are imaging, analytics, etc. And object storage is the de facto storage for cloud services like Amazon S3, OpenStack Swift, Google Cloud Storage, etc. What is Ceph? Ceph is an open source software defined storage. It runs on commodity hardware and there is absolutely no vendor lock in. It provides high reliability by providing erasure coding and replication. It is distributed in nature. It is highly scalable in the sense that more nodes can be added to make it scale out, and faster hardware can be added to make it scale up. And the architecture of Ceph is designed in such a way that there is no single point of failure. And since Ceph clusters are massive in nature, there are thousands and thousands of nodes. So there are bound to be failures in the system. There can be network failures, there can be disk failures, and the Ceph clusters are designed to be self-healing. And Ceph provides object, block, and file system interfaces under a unified storage system. The RGW component provides the object interfaces, RBD provides the block interfaces, and CephFS provides the file system interfaces. RADOS is the building block of Ceph. It stands for Reliable Autonomous Distributed Object Store. It is responsible for providing reliability by replication and erasure coding, and it also manages migration, replication, and all the other major functionalities which is responsible for maintaining the cluster in a healthy state. It is responsible for data placement in the cluster using an algorithm which is known as CRUSH. and Crush is a hash based algorithm. And Rados provides strong consistency as opposed to performance, in the sense that you will always get back whatever you write to the storage cluster. And LibRados is a library that provides access to Rados to applications and other Ceph components like Rados Gateway, RBD, and CephFS. What is Ceph Object Gateway? So Ceph Object Gateway is also known as Rados Gateway, and in short, we call it RGW. On one hand, we have Rados, which provides access to the clients using a native protocol over a socket. And on the other hand, we have the Ceph Object Gateway, which provides RESTful HTTP object storage interfaces to the underlying storage cluster. It is built on top of LibRados, and it is responsible for authenticating and authorizing any kind of request that comes in. It supports a couple of HTTP frontends. They are Beast and Civet Web, and it stores data in buckets and objects. Ceph Object Gateway is both AWS S3 as well as OpenStack Swift compliant, and we can write data using one API and access data using the other API, since both of them share the same namespace underneath. So this talk will mostly focus on the S3 features that are provided by the Ceph Object Gateway. So starting off with some of the basic features like create, get, and delete bucket. And then it supports create, get, copy, and delete objects. Then there are methods to manipulate ACLs on buckets and objects. And then we have methods for listing the buckets and listing the objects, and so on. Before acting upon any of the incoming user requests, we first need to authenticate and authorize that request. So in RGW, we have something known as users, which own buckets. And then there are tenants, which are namespaces under which users and buckets are created. So a user is associated with an access key ID and a secret access key. Hence, for any incoming request, a V2 or a V4 signature is calculated, and the request is authenticated. So this signature calculation or authentication can happen locally inside RGW, or it can be outsourced to a remote IDP like Keystone or LDAP. So once the authentication step is completed, we move on to the authorization part. So authorization is performed using the buckets and object ACLs that are attached to buckets and objects. And then we also have the newer authorization mechanisms in place, like the bucket policies and the IAM policies. So the bucket policies are policies that are attached to buckets and provide finer grained control to buckets as well as objects inside them. And then we have support for IAM policies, which are attached to users. And again, they provide finer grained access control to buckets and objects. And apart from all these mechanisms, we have support for secure token service, which provides temporary credentials back to a user that requests for it. And using these credentials, a user can access buckets which are there in another tenant or account. And it also helps in web identity federation using any OpenID Connect provider. And in our case, RGW has been integrated with Keycloak. In case of object storage, the files that get uploaded are usually very large in size. So this can lead to some kind of problems while uploading that file. There may be some network issues, or sometimes the user may encounter huge latencies while uploading that file. So the file can be divided into multiple small objects or multiple small parts, and then the smaller parts can be uploaded in parallel, and one after the other. And this improves the throughput. So in case there is an error while uploading one part, so we just need to re-upload that part without worrying about the other parts. And it also has an advantage that allows us to start uploading the object without even knowing the final size of the object. So this can be used while storing live streamed content. And in this case, we just need to tell the system that multi-part upload is now about to begin, and then we start uploading the file. And once the file has been uploaded, then we can indicate that now multi-part upload is going to end. Object versioning. This feature allows us to maintain multiple versions of the same object in the system. And this helps in case of overwrites as well as deletes. And it protects against any kind of accidental overwrites or deletes that a user may perform. We can, when we try to read back the object, we always get the latest version. And we can also read as well as delete objects using the version ID in case we want to delete or read an older version. And we can also list all the versions that are there in the system. But this feature takes up a lot of space since we are going to maintain many versions for one object. So one needs to be really careful while turning on this feature. Object lifecycle management allows us to automate data transitions. So we can define policies in such a way that we define the expiration time of an object. So once an object expires, it is moved to an entity known as garbage collector in the Ceph object gateway, and the garbage collector takes care of deleting the object permanently from the system. It also helps in a tier transition in the sense that we can have a policy which defines that the object can be moved from hot storage media to cold storage media and then can be finally deleted after a certain amount of time. So object lifecycle management helps in case of versioning. If we want the older versions of objects to get deleted after a certain amount of time, then we can define a policy for that. And then we can also define policies for multi-part uploads which have been aborted. If there are multi-part uploads which are halfway, we want to delete them, we can have a life cycle policy which will take care of that. So this brings me to the end of my part, and from the next slide onwards, Shilpa is going to talk about her part.
Thank you, Prita. Yeah, so I'm going to continue with more features of Rados Gateway or S3 Ceph in general. But first, this geo-replication is something that is specific to Ceph. This is a log-based approach, and where we try to replicate data between multiple geographical sites. And object replication is eventually consistent. It is an asynchronous copy of data between multiple clusters that are running Rados Gateway. So Amazon calls it CRR, which is cross-region replication, and we call it multi-site replication. The main use case would be disaster recovery for remote sites. The other advantage owing to its eventual consistency and asynchronous nature is that it would allow for use cases such as backing up the object storage to an external cloud cluster, which supports S3. Or you could have custom backup solutions like tape drives, and we could also allow it to have indexing metadata in Elasticsearch. So there are two ways of configuring replication. So one is to have data from all the buckets synced to other regions. The other way is to have a fine-grained control over what buckets one wants to sync. In the second option, we configure something called bucket sync policies, where we define data flow configurations on a per bucket basis. But in traditional replication, it is symmetrical, where we sync all the buckets to the other clusters, and they're a mirror image of each other. But with a bucket sync policy, we can choose what buckets to replicate, decide what clusters should participate in sync, and we can even establish a direction to the data flow. And buckets can divulge on the other zones, meaning they don't have to have the same ID or same name. They can replicate from any bucket with any name, and also even choose what data you want to replicate by specifying its prefix. Those are the kind of things that we can do with replication. And it operates in two modes, which is active-active and active-passive. Next one slide. Talking a little bit about how the sync process works. So we have logical entities called REMs and zone group and zones. So a REM basically represents a unique namespace, which consists of one or more zone groups, logical zone groups, and they again contain one or more zones, which has buckets and objects in turn. So a REM enables you the Ceph object gateway to support multiple namespaces, and also different kind of configurations and the data placements or data tiering configurations on the same hardware. So we create these entities on master Rados gateway, and we pull the configuration from all the other participating sites. So we have two kinds of changes that we track. One is the metadata change, which is mostly bucket and user operations. And all of these are forwarded to the master. So in metadata, I mentioned that it is asynchronous, but for metadata, it is always synchronous with master. So we forward it to the master zone first, update the metadata log, and then after that, after applying the changes there, each zone will pull the metadata log and apply changes locally. As for data changes, it maintains its own log called data log, and we have two different phases in that. One is the full sync and then the incremental, where we see if the bucket exists or not in other zones. And then if it doesn't exist, then fetch the bucket and we update the data log, and the rest of the data and everything else gets pulled after that in the incremental sync state. So these logs do get big because it tracks almost everything. So there's automatic trimming that happens that runs periodically to ensure that they don't fill up space. Next slide, please. So this is what a configuration might look like. We have a REM in which we have multiple zone groups, and each of them have their own zones replicating to each other. It can be active-active or active-passive, depending on what's the requirement. Next slide, please. With what we have in georeplication, we have built on top of it something called sync modules. This is, as I said, built on top of multi-site replication framework that allows for forwarding data and metadata to a different external tier. And a sync module allows for a set of actions to be performed whenever a data change occurs. So the first module is the Cloud Sync module, which basically syncs to a remote cloud service. So this module, the sync is unidirectional in this. It is not, the data is not synced back to the Rados gateway. It's only one way to the external data storage. The goal of this module is to enable syncing data to multiple cloud providers. The currently supported cloud providers are those that are compatible with S3. And things that need to be configured on Rados gateway would be the connection details, and for the remote object storage and access path in the form of URL, a profile that defines ACL mappings, and which source bucket. So with this, a unidirectional sync to a remote object store is achieved. The next one would be a PubSub module, which is a publish subscribe mechanism for object store events. So it provides so for any modification events that happens on object store, you can there's a way of having a publish subscribe mechanism for that. In this case, the events that are pushed to an endpoint on top of storing them to Ceph. So if events should only be pushed to an endpoint and that do not need to be stored in Ceph, we have a different mechanism called bucket notification, and that I'm going to be discussing in the next few slides. In this case, a REST API is provided for configurations and control interfaces for the PubSub mechanism. And events are stored in RGW objects in a specific, in special buckets and under a special user. Events cannot be accessed directly, but they have to be pulled and act using REST API. The next one is Elasticsearch. So this basically writes metadata from zones to Elasticsearch, which is an open source RESTful search engine that indexes content, different kind of content types against which users can run complex queries. So as of now, we store JSON of metadata data fields in Elasticsearch with configurable options like what bucket needs to be indexed by Elasticsearch, where the user will have custom metadata index, etc. And Rados Gateway in the metadata master zone can service these end user requests by itself, and which is basically just forwarded to Elasticsearch. And this way, we don't really expose Elasticsearch endpoint to public. And the last one is archive sync module, which is it's a read-only zone to store a history of versions of S3 objects, and it's meant to serve. It's actually not meant to serve the user directly, but it is only its purpose is to just store the versions of different objects, as Rita had already covered on the other slides about object versioning. This is what we were talking about. The functionality is used to have a configuration where many like non-version zones replicate their data and metadata, providing high availability, while the archive zone just captures all these updates to the data and metadata and consolidate them as versions of S3 objects. So this way, we could save space on the other zones by not having these versioning objects enabled. And you can retrieve the versions from this object, from this zone. Another feature is event notification. So it basically, we receive notification when certain, this is mainly to receive notifications when certain events happen in the bucket. And so this sends information out of Rados Gateway when certain events that it could be object create or object delete, events that happen on the bucket. And publishers communicate asynchronously with subscribers by sending messages to a topic. A topic is nothing but a logical access point and communication channel. And clients are subscribers, and they can subscribe to the SNS topic and receive these published messages using supported protocols. For example, you would want notifications for creation, like put, post, or copy types, or deletion of objects in object store. So this is what we support in Ceph Object Store. But in AWS, they also support replication events and backup restore events. So AWS supports Amazon SNS, Simple Notification Service, Simple Queue Service, and Lambda. And Ceph supports some of the common messaging services like AMQP, RabbitMQ, and Kafka. So all that a user has to do is create topics on each bucket with push endpoint parameters, and we have to create a notification entity for the event types, and can filter out events based on the prefix suffix that you provide, or even regular expressions matching of the keys. REST API is provided again to provide configuration and control interfaces. And the events are in JSON format. And in AWS, you can also do some very nice things like run custom code in response to your S3 bucket events. So you just upload your custom code to AWS Lambda and create what is called a Lambda function. And when Amazon S3 detects an event of some specific type, for example, image uploads or app activity, in-app activity, or website clicks, it can publish the event to AWS Lambda, and you can invoke your function, and in turn, it runs your function. So that's the case of event notification. Next slide. Yeah, and lastly, I would like to just talk about a few other features that supported in S3. So the first one is hosting a static website. A static website is an individual page, web pages that include static content. You could use an object store to host static website, and it is quite simple. The only additional configuration would be to have HA proxy configured in front of the Rados gateways, and enable bucket website hosting, and add an index document and put some content in it that you want to see on your website. So once we configure HA proxy with website endpoints to expose the bucket, which is meant for static serving, and it is done. So you can just, like the example that I've shown, you could just go to the website, which is a static one, which is actually hosted by the bucket. And the next one would be exporting over NFS. So object gateway namespaces can also be exported over NFS v3 and v4. So the API used here is in general, but its design is strongly influenced by FSAL of API, which is a file system abstraction layer API of NFS Ganesha, which is a user mode file server, and it supports v3 and v4, NFS v3 and v4. The implementation maps Unix style path names onto S3 buckets and objects. So the top level of the namespace consists of S3 buckets represented as NFS directories, and the files and subdirectories to the buckets would be represented as objects, and / is the supported path delimiter, as you can see in the example. So RGW NFS interface supports most operations on files and subdirectories, but there are a few exceptions. And a very minimal configuration is required. All we need to do is configure the export section of NFS by providing the path, telling where to find the export, and the access type, and the user name and credentials. And that's about it. And that's how simple it is. So there are other features that are also supported, but we would not be able to cover in this presentation. So thank you. That concludes our presentation, and you can reach us out at these email IDs, and we are active in Ceph and Ceph Devel IRC channels as well.